what would be the best kind of nutrition diet to optimize one's hormones?
PRT and Hormone Optimization channel. I was on the channel before, so I've been following the channel, watching it every now and then, so be sure to check them out.
Consider subscribing, hit that notification bell, and you'll be on your way.
Welcome to the TRT and Hormone Optimization YouTube channel. My name is Steven de Vos, and as a guest we have back Ali Gilbert. Welcome, Ali.
Hello.
And today's question is, what would be the best kind of nutrition diet to optimize one's hormones?
Whew, that's a loaded question. So I feel like with nutrition, it's one of those things nowadays where you can convince someone to change their religion before you can change their opinion on food. It's one of the most highly debated topics on earth, probably, because everybody wants to know what is the best diet. And are there approaches that work better for people for hormone optimization? Absolutely. So let me preface this with, this is my opinion based on what I've experienced working with clients. So if people are wondering more information, you can always message me and stuff like that. But this is nothing that's based on certain studies or whatever. I'm just going to incorporate basic science with anecdotal evidence of what I see with people. So what I tend to do with people is that, someone comes to me for an initial consult or they want to start training. Everyone has to fill out a 3-day food log. I have to see what you're taking in. And it's not to judge, if you eat McDonald's, I really don't care. I just want to know how much protein, how much fat, and how many carbs are you eating a day. I can tell you there's only one time in the past, I don't even know how many years, where I've had to lower somebody's calories. And that could be the population that I work with tends to be pretty fit, or they've worked with other coaches and gotten themselves messed up metabolically. But nobody is eating enough protein. Nobody. Even grown men. And when I tell them, hey, I'm eating 200 grams a day, they're like, how do I do that? It's so hard. And so I'm like, well, you do a food log for a reason, because if you're eating 50 grams of protein a day, I'm not going to push you to 200. You're going to hate me. And so is your ass. It's not going to feel good. So I would say if anybody is looking for fat loss or muscle gain, you have to have a high protein diet. Somebody who is in lower calories or in a calorie deficit, probably a little bit higher protein. But if you're trying to recomp, so gain some muscle, drop some fat, you're going to want to have high protein and some good amount of carbohydrates. And a lot of people will push the keto diet, which, by the way, has been around since the 1800s. William Banting in Sweden, you probably know, published a book about, it was called the Banting diet, but he had made up the keto diet for people who had seizures and neurological disorders. But we're acting like, it's new, and all of a sudden we have keto cookies and keto pancakes and all this stuff. So if somebody does not strength train and just walks every day and kind of is sedentary, then keto diet is fine. But the question I always ask somebody, if this style of eating, is this a way that you can see yourself eating for the rest of your life? Because the problem we run into is we want to lose weight, we want to add muscle. We can't do it massively at the same time, but it can be done. But people usually cut calories and add exercise. So what does that do? Creates a massive deficit. And eventually hunger is going to go through the roof. Energy is going to go through the floor. Hormones are going to go all the way down the drain, because our body doesn't care what we want to look like. It wants to keep us alive. So it's going to say, okay, well, Steven's only feeding me 900 calories. He doesn't need a rock hard boner because we can't procreate. We've got to stay alive right now. So I'm going to down regulate all unnecessary things like mood and boners and all that stuff and just keep him alive. And that's what we run into a lot with people who want to lose fat, is they slash their calories way too much. And then they cut protein, and they mostly cut carbs, which is going to provide them the right kind of energy to lift. So what I'll usually do is put somebody on at least a gram per pound of body weight in protein. And sometimes just raising protein can actually get somebody to drop fat, because protein is the one macronutrient that we can overeat, and it's very, very, very unlikely it will be stored as body fat. And they've actually done studies where they put somebody in a calorie surplus of 800 just from protein, and they didn't gain any weight. I mean, it's amazing. So you actually can push it down what we call like a caloric funnel, to where you're eating so much, but you're actually burning calories, because the process the body has to put protein through to become an energy source is so complicated. It would rather say, ooh, carbs, ooh, fat, and use that as energy. Carbs are the quickest form, and then we have fat as the slowest, and then protein can be broken down, but again, it's very unlikely to be stored as body fat. Fat is actually the most likely to be stored as body fat. And, you know, we went through, like, I was born in 81. So the 80s to the 90s was low fat everything. You remember that? In America, we had Snackwell's cookies, we had fat-free everything, and then it was just replaced with chemicals. And then we decided, well, fat's okay, but we're going to have all the fat because we're America and we do everything in extremes. So now we have fat in our coffee, and we have, you know, coconut oil by the tablespoon, and that cures, you know, everything in life. So it's really finding a balance, because people who say, oh, I did the keto diet and it worked, I lost 12 pounds, except they're 20 pounds heavier now. So that didn't work. Any diet that worked before didn't work because you're obviously heavier and you don't feel as good. So it's finding what is the way that somebody can eat that is sustainable. And I find that eating higher protein solves a lot of these issues, because you don't have the hunger levels that you would normally on a low calorie diet. And you have the ability to kind of mitigate any muscle loss if you're in a deficit, because you're going to keep strength training in, but also you have enough protein to support that too. So it's really understanding where the person's coming from when they say, I want to do XYZ diet. And then it's convincing them that if they're eating carbohydrates, they're not going to blow up into fat. And as I had mentioned on another video, maybe people can't tolerate carbs right away. Then they need to get in a better aerobic shape so their body can use carbs and fats for fuel. Because how fun is it where you get leaner, you need more carbs because you have more muscle. So you have more storage capacity for glycogen to require more carbohydrates. So that's why a lot of my clients are eating very high levels of calories that they weren't before, and they're training enough to support it. So people will train more but not eat to support it. Athletes don't do that. Like Michael Phelps would not go in a calorie deficit to train for the Olympics. That makes no sense. But we all want to train like athletes. We all want to look like athletes, but no one wants to eat like the athletes. And on the other hand, you know, if someone isn't training as much, they don't have to eat as much. And Europeans are doing this, where you guys walk everywhere. So walking everywhere and eating less naturally is going to have a little bit of a deficit, but not a huge deficit. So we can kind of go back and forth between eating less and exercising less, like if you're on vacation or you have to travel, and eating more and training more. So understanding how much you're training and then supporting that with calories. And that's the downfall sometimes when people try to do their own calorie calculations, is they only do their BMR, which is their resting metabolic rate. They don't account for the additional exercise. And then that's where their hormones go through the floor, because again, anyone who's dieting, thyroid's going to go low, testosterone's going to go low, estrogen's going to lower. And overall, you're just going to feel like really lethargic and less energetic, where we have to eat to support our hormones, and your body will thank you for that.
Not eating carbs like in the ketogenic diet is not the best option to optimize hormones, right?
No, there's been studies too where they've shown that men on ketogenic diets have shown to have lower testosterone levels, and similar to vegan diets and vegetarian diets. And, you know, if I have someone who comes to me, I don't have any vegans right now, but I try to understand why they take that approach, because if it's not a moral or religious thing, I do the best I can to convince them to switch back, because usually they're taught, well, this is the healthiest way, or I have high cholesterol, this is the only thing I have to do. So We know that that's bullshit. And so we don't want their hormones to be depleted, because you take any one macronutrient and eliminate it, then you're going to lower something. Same with going too low in fat. I tend to have people on lower fat, but not zero fat, because fat will support cholesterol, which will support the manufacturing of hormones. But again, if you deprive your body of the fuel it needs, you're not going to build any muscle, because you have to have something under the fat to tone. The only way you do that is by providing your body fuel. You can't build a house with, just the foundation. You got to add in all the supportive structures too. And this is what the body needs. So people are very afraid to do that, but that's how we get people to eat 3, 4, 5. I have one guy on 700 grams of carbs, because you do the work to get your body to become a machine so that it can use all this fuel, and you're not going to gain weight because you're eating enough and you always have been. So it's a lot of fun, but sometimes it's exhausting with the educational aspect of it, because people are so set in their ways. But then I say to them, I'm like, well, what you're doing, is that working for you? There's a reason you came to me. And I've been through that too. I'm a woman. We've always been taught we have to be less. We have to be small. And I'm 5'3" and I'm 59 kilos. And it's really fluctuated maybe 1 or 2 kilos in the past 2 years. And I've looked completely different. And I'm eating 200 grams of protein. That's more than a lot of my male clients come to me eating, and they just can't fathom that eating more, they're actually going to drop weight. And I'm like, yeah, because you're eating nothing before.
I read that a lot of people believe that fasting, intermittent fasting, or even 1 day or more days fasting is good for hormone balance. What's your view on that?
I mean, if you ever get blood work fasted, your growth hormone is going to be higher. Yes. That doesn't mean that it's helping you in any anabolic way, because if you did your labs later in the day, your cortisol will be probably pretty high too. So, at some point when people ask about fasting, there's no magic that fasting does for fat loss. It's just a way to structure your calories. So sometimes like the 16 and 2, like I don't really consider that fasting. I just consider it like, calorie restriction or whatever window you want to use. And some people like that structure, and that's totally fine. My only thing with that is, can you get all the calories you need in that window? So let's be honest here. So I would say maybe 90% of people have a gut issue, or they don't digest food very well, at least here in the US. If you're going to cram all those calories within, a 6 to 8 hour eating window, it's going to wreak havoc on your digestive system. So you're better off eating a meal, spacing it out, eating another meal. I used to totally buy the whole, you must eat every 3 hours and it has to be 6 meals, and you cannot go less than 2 hours, bodybuilding stuff. Now we know there's no set amount of times we actually have to eat, but the general consensus is to maintain muscle and or build, you want at least 4 doses of protein a day. So for gut issues and stuff, fasting, I think within a 24 to 48 hour period, it does wonders for that. But from a fat loss standpoint, for guys, if you want to use it to structure calories, awesome. If you're in a very severe deficit for a little bit, go for it. But for women, it's disastrous because our system is much more stress reactive. So we react a lot harsher. Our hormones go crazy wacky. And there's a select few of women who can handle it and they do very well on it. But, for the general public, if you guys like having that structure and you can actually eat the amount that you have to within that window, then absolutely, And so that segues into like the calorie deficit thing that we were going into, is to start low, because how many people do you know just completely cut them out? Like 500 calories or more. And we're at like a 40% deficit. The deeper the deficit, the less time you want to spend in there. So I think the longest I will have somebody in an aggressive deficit, so we'll say like maybe 30% or higher, 3 weeks. That is it. You want to get in and you want to get out. And you want to spend the majority of your time eating at what we call maintenance, or just below, or if you have to build, just above. So this whole like dirty bulk bullshit, like, no, we're going to do a normal bulk so that we don't get obese and then have to cut it all off in 3 months and hate life. So it's when setting up, your program, if you set yourself up in too deep a calorie deficit, that's when it really affects the hormones if you're in it for too long. So the deeper it is, the shorter it should be, and then bring your calories back up. And it kind of mitigates all those harsh adaptations that our body makes metabolically and hormonally.
Okay, so you discussed calories, fats, carbs, and protein. You even discussed meal timing, that it doesn't matter that much. Maybe one last broad question. What's your advice on pre, intra, and post-workout nutrition?
I like this question because I actually have a couple guys who are on very high carb diets. So this is 400 plus, and getting them in can be difficult, and getting them in what we call clean, because I use the term clean because people know what it means. I don't care our opinions on it, whatever. So getting it in cleanly, meaning like white rice and, fruit and all that stuff, can be difficult. So sometimes they may have to use cereal. But what I have some of my guys doing is, because they train early in the morning, not everyone can really stomach a lot of carbs early. So cyclic dextrin, which is carbohydrate powder, or a maltodextrin powder, those tend to work really well with either some whey protein, or if that's too much on the stomach, throw in some branched chain amino acids and then dilute it, because the more you dilute it, the quicker it'll be absorbed. Slam it, train. And then you could have another dose of carb powder while you're training, and then have another shake if you want, or it could be a meal of carbs right after training. And these can all contain around 100 grams of carbohydrates, because the body is likely to take those carbs while it's training or after and store it as glycogen and muscle fuel. And there's a lot of debate about the anabolic window and the best time to have carbohydrates. So if people are sport athletes and they're training twice a day, then absolutely nutrient timing cannot be messed with. If they're, regular gym goers like all of us, you can play with it a little bit if you have very high carbs. Get the majority in 30 minutes after, another 30 minutes, you can have another shake or that powder. It doesn't have to be early in the morning. And then an hour later, another dose. And that kind of fills your body in doses to where it's not too crazy high, but also so the body can use it and store it as glycogen. And so I find that tends to work very well with people who have to get a lot of carbohydrates in. Otherwise, if this is the only time somebody is really moving throughout the week, intra-workout nutrition is not so much a big deal. If the workouts are long, okay, but if it's a 45 to 60-minute workout, we don't really have to worry too much about intra-nutrition. Mm-hmm. But people will wait 2 or 3 hours after training sometimes to eat. Like, I'll have guys, when I worked in a gym, 6 a.m., then they'll go to catch the train to New York City, and then they'll get in the office, and it's 3 hours later, they're like, oh yeah, I had an egg. I'm like, what? What were you doing on the train? Like, there's no reason why you can't have something right after. I think everybody will feel better, but also less likely to inhale everything once they get home if they have something right after training.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Ali, that were all my questions. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
I'll put the link to you in the description of this video. Anything else you wanted to share with the viewers?
No, just if you guys have any nutrition or training questions, hit me up on Facebook or Instagram at the Ali Gilbert.
Okay, thank you so much. And now give this video a thumbs up and go watch one of these videos to learn a ton more about TRT and hormone optimization.